knowing that you are a God of love, a God of peace. We ask you to open our minds, open our hearts to be present to this information so that we might find you in new ways, so that we might know and even have some tools to know that everything will be all right as long as you are with us and as long as we are and remain your faithful people. And we ask this as we do all things through Christ our Lord. Amen. All right, so before we get much further, what I'd like to do is if you can just take a moment and in the chat box, put your name and your congregation and your what if question. So let me explain what if means. You probably have seen this at some point, or if your phone has ever gone bad and you gotten it wet and you take a bag of rice and you put your phone in the rice, it should come as no surprise that was not part of the planning that Steve Jobs did, right? When he planned the iPhone, he didn't say, aha, when people get it wet, they can just put it in rice and it'll be fine. Believe it or not, that's an innovation. When we take something that was made for something else, rice was made for eating, and we make it something else, that's a what if. I have an issue and I think I have a solution. What if we did fill in the blank? And the same is true for all of us that are doing ministry in the church. There comes a time when we look around when we're doing something and we've inevitably asked ourselves, what if we just did this? Or what if we did that? We probably are asking, my guess, and I'll go back to this for a second, my guess is that you're looking around saying, and why you're here is because you have a what if question that you're trying to figure out, how do I try that? How do we try new things? If you don't, that's perfectly fine. By the end of this, I promise you, you will, because this is intended to lead that. So go ahead, put your name, put your congregation. Bob Brown from St. Mary's in Stuart, Florida. Good to be here with you today, Bob. Thank you. The others, make sure you share it with everyone so that we can all see who's with us among us. So just take a moment. Kristen, 2 items on her mind. Oh, she's already got herself thinking. So, hello, Deborah. Belinda, St. David in the UK. Hello, thanks. Oh, I forgot to mention to those of you in Southern Florida that we did also extend the invitation to our friends in the Church of England. So, yay, good to see you here, Belinda. What if we cannot meet together for the next year? How do I grow faith as a congregation and be a blessing to the communities around us? Well done. And we will, believe it or not, that's related to the what if. Duncan Hurd from All Saints, Jensen Beach, welcome. Faye Kelly, Church of the Atonement in Lauderdale Lakes, Florida. Denrick Roll is with us. Where are you from, Denrick? Where are you at? Faye Walker, Atonement, Lauderdale Lakes also. Yay for Lauderdale Lakes. Hillary from St. Kevin's Episcopal Church. Larry from St. Ambrose in Fort Lauderdale. What? No one from Miami or Fort Lauderdale yet? I'm sorry, or Coral Gables or Kendall? What's going on here? Que pasa? Iona Duncan, Church of the Atonement. A lot of people from Lauderdale Lakes. Welcome. Kristen Lombardi, Diocesan Youth, making programs work online to keep conversation going. Good. Yeah. How might we do that? St. Andrews, Palmetto Bay, frankly, same as with Diocesan Youth, reimagining programming that is engaging using digital forms. Brilliant. Cynthia from Incarnation in Miami. Thank you, Miami, for showing up on the board. What if we could get more people engaged? Yeah, these are the types of questions. What if we could get more people engaged, for example? In fact, you will particularly like the example that I use, Cynthia, throughout our conversation today. There's the historic St. Agnes Church in Miami. Yes, you're right near the design district, right? If I recall correctly, that's near where that is. What, Bob Brown, what if we try spiritual development with youth, families, and older? Hey, yeah, what if? That's a brilliant. Excellent. So you guys, welcome. This is great. Claire Dowling in the London, UK, in St. Paul's in Marylebone. I hope I said that right. What if the Spirit is at work in radically new ways in this time? That's actually not a what if question. That's a for sure question, right? You're absolutely right. Yeah. Grace Episcopal Church in Yorktown, Virginia. Hoping we can think about the Eucharist. What if we think more about what exactly we're doing when we can't physically gather? Absolutely. These are great questions. You guys, you have the right mentality. See, I thought I was right when I said that you all probably have some things that you're already bringing with you to this conversation. So thank you. This is great. And this is exactly where we need to go. So let me begin, as you should, in any sort of conversation like this. Hi, everyone. I'm Lorenzo. Nice to meet you. And I am the director of the TryTank. And TryTank is the experimental laboratory for church growth and innovation. And we'll talk about that in just a second more. I grew up in Southern Florida. I was born and raised Mexico City, but then I grew up in Miami and Kendall. And I went from the cathedral, which is where I was a member, to go to seminary. And then when I was done with seminary, there weren't any jobs in South Florida. So Bishop Frade commended me elsewhere, and I ended up in Los Angeles. Who'd have thunk it? Not a place I ended up. And now I live in Palm Springs, California, which is very nice, I gotta say. Though it gets a little bit warm, but it's a dry heat. You all will understand that one. A lot of people that I talk to not always get that one, but it's a dry heat, right? And then I usually respond with, so is my oven, but I don't hang out in there, do I? So this is how usually innovation happens in the church. We think about an idea, we pray about it, we write it out, form a committee, hold listening sessions, write a paper, go to a conference, do theological reflection, talk about it in the diocese, discern some more, bring it to the vestry. They'll say no the first time. Then you bring it back to the vestry, and then finally you try it. And that generally is how you end up with a MySpace page in the year 2020. That's pretty much how that works, right? This is how we end up with churches that have that. We thought about it as like, is there a different way of doing innovation in the church? And we came up with a different way. What if we just try it? What if we just go out and try it, figure a simple way of doing it? So that's sort of the model that we've been using for TryTank. As you heard me mention, TryTank is the experimental lab for church growth and innovation. And let me go a little bit more into detail about what I mean by that. First of all, what is a TryTank? Well, first, we are a joint venture. We are co-owned by Virginia Theological Seminary and General Theological Seminary. General happens to be the place that I went to seminary at, and Virginia is the place that I'm now working towards my doctorate in. So they're both good partners in this venture. They're good conversation partners, and they give me a lot of leeway to do all of this. All right, so we're a joint venture, which by itself, if you think about it, two seminaries working together in our church, that in and of itself is an experiment and an innovation. We're not known for usually playing well together, but here we are. So, but what exactly? You're like, okay, Lorenzo, I get it. You're a joint venture, but what exactly is it? Is it a think tank? Well, kind of, but not really. You know, a think tank thinks about something, and then they put out a paper. And then it's up to you as to whether you take the recommendations or you want to do something. So it's a little bit more than that. Is it a way to save the church? God, no. That is not our job. In fact, when I was about to take the job, one of my final questions was, how will we measure success in this work? And they said, because we will have failed more often than we succeeded, which means we're trying well. I'm like, okay, I'm in. I was afraid that they were going to say that this was a silver bullet, that we were going to discover exactly what the church needed. That was not going to be for me, and I don't think it's for anyone. It's God's church, and if it needs saving, one person already did that 2,000 years ago. So the rest of it is how do we manage the church itself? Rather, it's a place where we can ask that question to begin with. We began with, which is, what if? What if we do this differently? What if we did that differently? What if we added different music? What if we did all of these questions that we have thought through? So it was this place. But if you think about it, all those times that you may have thought, what if, you probably either didn't have the time or the resources to actually go and do it. So this was an opportunity for us to say, what if we dedicate time and resources to do those questions, to actually expand on them, say, what if? Oh, well, yeah, what if? And actually go and explore and actually ideate and actually go and try it. So that's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be this place that actually did things. And that's why we're more than just a think tank. We're a TryTank. We're a think tank that actually takes action. And so, but I think our experiments is what really speaks best for us. And we have we have 56 of experiments so far. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at some? And by the way, that is me at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, where I was literally on the floor with a guy from MIT talking about innovation and how we might bring the design thinking, which is ultimately how our framework that we use, and we'll go a lot more into detail of design thinking in a moment. but that's the framework that we use for the work that we do. So let's look at some of our experiments to show you. Remembering that in all that we do, it's all about Jesus. All the work that we do must always be centered on Jesus and the gospel and the good news, because otherwise it is nothing. Otherwise, no matter how successful it might be, it is nothing. And particularly when things don't work out and it's a failure, it would be easy to chalk it up to, but when we're centered on Jesus, when we're centered on God, then even when we fail in trying something new, we know that we've done good. We know that we've done the work that we're called to do in this world. So here are some of the experiments. So when COVID-19 happened, we had to stop a whole bunch of our experiments because our experiments are in congregations. So we had to literally just say, okay, pause, because there were no congregations. Nobody was meeting, right? But we did see another need. We saw that there were a lot of people who were dying and that there wouldn't be enough chaplains to be present to the people who were dying. So we said, might there be a play? Might there be an opportunity in there for us? And we asked, well, what if we got retired clergy and one phone number so that people who needed someone to be with them in this time could be with them? And so we created Dial-A-Priest. There was one national phone number that people could call, and you would end up with one of 100 retired clergy from the Episcopal Church on the other end of the call. These are people with decades of experience in ministry who have now retired. And they were so willing to volunteer that we ended up with 100 actually on the call, on the line, on Dial-A-Priest. But at the same time, we also ended up with about 200, just over 200 others who were volunteers on a wait list who wanted to volunteer. That's how generous our church is. And we put the number out there. It was featured in the New York Times. It was featured on NBC News, on Univision, Telemundo, a whole bunch of places, newspapers, USA Today picked it up, their network. And we ended up taking a whole bunch of calls. We just recently ended it because, as it turns out, the people who most wanted to reach out to a priest, and this speaks to our society, right, a lot, were Roman Catholics. And for them, it's really important who gives the last rites administration at the time of death, that it be a Roman Catholic priest, otherwise it doesn't count, right? But we provided something like close to 20 hours over the few weeks that it ran. We provided 20 hours total aggregate of conversations with people where we were just present to them. And usually there would be 5-minute conversations. So it was a whole bunch of conversations that we did. And what I think is also very important about what we figured out in this thing is that we could go from idea to actually having a live phone number taking calls in 7 days. That's how quickly we were able to do that, to literally find the technology to do it, find the volunteers, train the volunteers to go on there and put them on there on a phone. That was a 7-day process that we did that in. So it showed us that we were able to be very agile as a church. And two, it also showed us that we have a vast resource in the retired clergy of our church. And so be on the lookout, because we will have other experiments that come up that utilize our clergy, because they're really good at this work. Now, this other one, and I'll start to play the video so you can actually see it as it happens. This is called digital collection plate. What it is, it's about the size of 2 cell phones, as you see it there on the video. You dip your credit card in. You can see it also has the designs. For those of you in the UK, that's for tap technology, and I know that you guys have it in the UK already. But this was an opportunity for people to, and there's one of 6 amounts. And in just a few seconds, what you just saw was the person actually making a contribution to the church. That's how long it took. That was it. And why do we want to do this? Because we see the trends that we are going to a cashless society. And it will not be too far in the future where people don't have cash in their pockets. In fact, if anything, it was probably accelerated a little bit by COVID, as we wanted to pay more with our Apple Pay or with credit cards, and also because right now, if you're getting someone into your church who is not a member of your church and they have a $20 bill and a $1 bill, you are not getting the $20 bill. I'm just let's be honest about this, right? So the more we make it easier for people to contribute to the church, then the better it would be. Now, we're actually changing it around a little bit so it'll be different. So it's just about tap. Because in Europe, tap technology, which is a credit card that has the 4 little lines in the back, it's a tap card. It means you can just tap it onto the machine and make a payment. You don't have to dip it. You don't have to swipe it. You don't have to do anything else. By the end of this year, it was expected that we would have close to 300 million tap cards in the US. out of the total 650 million credit cards that are presently in the US. So as we're going more and more towards that, this will be a much more feasible for us to use. So that was our tapping technology. So then we did this one. You may have heard of it, actually, Latino Ministry in a Box. The question that we said is, what happens when there's a well-meaning rector whose church has a lot more Latinos around them, but they don't speak Spanish and they want to reach out to that community? Is there a way? And so we said, what if we used multi-site technology that our evangelical brothers and sisters have done so well, meaning receiving the information via a screen? And what if we used a systematic approach to be able to do that? It worked. We actually tried this in 8 congregations around the country, and we did it. We began with a little Bible study on a particular night, and people built community. Even though the rector was not a Spanish speaker, there began to be a Spanish-speaking contingent part of their congregation. And this actually was so successful that the dioceses of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware together are joining together to offer it as a ministry for the church, for the wider church. So it will be made available to anyone who wants to use it to be able to reach out to their community, even if they don't speak Spanish. And what you see here is Father Alex and Mother Nancy. They were the ones who recorded the videos that we used, and that was us filming on location. So yay for working on that. Connected congregations. We used this SMS technology, texting technology to connect people. As it turns out, we were in the middle of the experiment when COVID happened, and it was an incredibly easy way for people to reach out to their members really quick to say, the congregation's been shut down. Is there anything I can pray for? And the technology is so advanced these days that you don't have to do it on your phone. You do it from your computer. You're able to literally be able to send a text to 50 people, all personalized, like, hey, Deborah, or hey, Jody, it's Father Lorenzo, just, you came up in my prayers today. Is there anything in particular you want me to pray for? And then people would respond back. The theory here is, what if we connected more regularly with people? Because what we know is that people who more regularly connect with their congregation are more likely to go to church on Sunday. So this is the same as brand loyalty. This comes straight from business school, which is brand engagement leads to brand loyalty. So if there was engagement with the church, would people be more apt to go back? So far, the results are yes, they will. And it also turns out that it's really, really good for pastoral care to just check in with people on a more regular basis, because that's one of the things when we're going down to more and more churches with just one priest, one person sort of running it. How do you keep up with a congregation of 100 families? How are you able to? You're not going to be able to make 100 phone calls each week, but you can reach out via text to be connected. So that's going very well. It's still an active experiment in 5 congregations around the country. This one, and I'll start to play this one.
Hey friends, it's Father Lorenzo, and I'm going to teach you how to use the Alexa skill. Once you have enabled the skill using the link on this page, simply do what I'm about to do. Alexa, open Episcopal prayer.
The Lord be with you.
Why, thank you. And also with you.
Let us pray.
And while it's very soft, she begins to play a sound file on there. We've now partnered with Forward Movement. They're actually going to be taking over this ministry, because right now about 500 people on a regular basis are doing morning or evening prayer, because she's now advanced from there. She now knows what time of the day it is, and she will play you the right file, whether it's morning prayer or evening prayer. And it is the full 12 to 17 minute version of morning or evening prayer. So that Alexa, she's a smart gal. In fact, it used to be, if you heard me say on there, you have to enable the skill. You don't have to do that anymore. We were, as you see on the quote there, one of the most engaged skills on Alexa. All of a sudden they wrote to me like, we want to send you a check because you're so engaging. And I'm like, what is this? This must be phishing, right? They want my information and they're going to send it off to somewhere. No. It was not some prince from, some country I've never heard of. It was actually Amazon. And they were like, yeah, it's not so much that you have big numbers, it's the fact that the numbers you have, people keep coming back on a regular basis with it. Like I said, about 500 people now do this on a regular basis. It's also available for the Google Assistant. If you happen to have a Google Assistant, you can say, so in Alexa, is Alexa, open Episcopal prayer. And that's a great party trick. If you're at someone's house and you know it's an Alexa, just go ahead and start praying. And in Google, it's Google talk to, hey, Google, talk to Episcopal prayer. And like I said, Forward Movement's taking over that one, and we're excited by that work. So this other one is one that is currently on pause because there are no congregations. But as our church, you probably saw the numbers last fall that came out. Our church is getting smaller in the sense of number of people in a congregation. We now have more congregations with 10 or fewer people on a Sunday than we do with 300 or more people on a Sunday. So just that's where our church is. What that means is that we have a whole bunch of churches that can't even afford a supply priest. And so they do morning prayer, the 10 people that gather there or 8 people that gather there. And the preaching, it's well-meaning, but it's not always the best, right? I even heard a story one time that a woman got up and read an article from Reader's Digest. Nothing against Reader's Digest. It's a great publication. But I'm going to guess that the Jesus count was probably pretty low in that article. Whereas we know we have really good preachers in our church. So what if we recorded some of them on an ongoing basis and they pre-recorded a sermon that we made available through technologies, right? So just roll out a television. Now that people are used to digital, roll out a television and play a good sermon from someone. I'd rather watch a really good sermon from someone of the skill set of like a Michael Curry than I would of reading of a Reader's Digest article. And that's sort of the thinking, will this work in those congregations? So we're going to try it. That's still to come. That's one of the experiments that's coming up for us. This other one, I'll just play you the beginning of it so that you can hear a little bit of it. Oh no, I don't want to actually play it. I want to play it here. Does it not play it here? There it is.
When we hear the word sin, a lot of us imagine Adam and Eve in a garden. Adam being persuaded by Eve to take an apple. Satan luring them down a path. And the result is sin. For lots of people, sin is linked with sex. But in truth, sin is much more complicated.
So we created this.
When we hear the word sin...
we created this because the world's second largest search engine is YouTube. Young people go there to search things all the time. And when you go on there right now to search some theological terms like what is sin or what is baptism or what is prayer, the responses you get are really weird and awful and just like not who we are. So we said, what if we actually created a small library of theological terms or concepts and that we were able to explain them in about 2 or 3 minutes so that when a young person or anybody goes to YouTube to search and we actually pay so that it will rank higher. Would that work? And so we just finished the 5th video. We have 5 videos in our theological library and we're going to test it. We're going to market it so that if somebody does type in the word, what is sin? This will be one of the first ones that comes up on YouTube as an ad that we pay for because we want to see how people respond to it. And then hopefully we'll be able to expand the library and do more because this is where young people are to remember what if we wanted to reach more young people, somebody asked in one of the questions. Yeah, this is how we do it. We go and meet them where they are. We go and meet them when they're asking those questions. So that's what we're trying to do with the theological videos. Spin Church. I love this content. This was meant to be one of the best things ever, I got to tell you. So if you've ever gone to a soul cycle, I don't know if soul cycles exist in Southern Florida or not, but they're like big in New York and other places. It's basically a spin studio, right? With all the little bicycles and you walk in and it's dark in there and they have candles all around and on the walls, it says, find your soul. And then when you begin the exercise, the person, right, the instructor that's leading you, she's like, all right, there's no yesterday, there's no tomorrow, there's only this day that's been created for you. And I was like, if you throw in a Jesus, you got yourself a sermon going on, probably better than Reader's Digest. So we said, what about, is it possible that people are finding their spirituality, if they're not going to church, that they're finding it in group fitness? And what if we did that? What if we did group fitness that was actually liturgical? What if we actually created an actual service that went along with it? And so what you see is me there leading the service for Spin Church that we tried it out. And so here's what happened, by the way, we advertised it. So we knew almost 27,000 people saw our ads on Facebook. 86% of them were women. We were exactly where we needed to be. They saw those ads 160,000 times. So those 27,000 people saw the ads a bunch of times. And of those, almost 1,200 actually liked it or shared it or did something with the ad. That's a higher than 3 times the normal engagement from Facebook that we had going on there. And 9 people signed up to go to the class, and none of them went to the class, right? So that was by the way, that person that's there with me, that's Deacon. I think she knew all along that this was not going to work. You could see it in her face. She's like, what are you doing? I think what we discovered from this was a couple of things. By the way, it is holy failure. This was just, we failed. There was no way about it. We failed. We tried it out, but we tried it. One is important. And that means we were trying for God. 2, we also discovered that what's probably possible and likely, because once we had the information for those 9 people, we were able to connect with them, is that they already have group fitness classes. They just thought this was neat, and maybe because they also have a part of them that's spiritual, but none of them, when they already are finding their spirituality from a group fitness class, they already have a group fitness class. So this is no different than me going to someone that's already a member of another church and saying, come to my church. They're already going to a church. So that's why it didn't work. But you can only figure this out when you try. And so those are some of the experiments. Like I said, we have 56 experiments that are going on. And at this moment, I just want to take a quick little pause here. We're perfectly on time. I just want to take a short little pause and see if there's any questions about TryTank itself before we move on to the rest. And Jody, I don't know if people, you know how to raise your hands, right? If you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's going to be a little button that says under participants. And there you can raise your hand, and that way Jody can see it, because I cannot see all of you at the same time. Before we take our little break here. Linda, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the level of how many people does it take to get these things going? You know, I'm thinking about if you've got too many people involved, can it just be 1 or 2 people involved and it just gets going, or does it take a whole group of people to get something like this going?
Yeah, that's a great question. You need one person to, but I always suggest a team, and we'll talk a little bit about who you want in your team in just a moment. Because as you begin to do the process that we're going to talk about, having a team will always give you better insights, will always give you better information than just one person, and also the buy-in. Because inevitably, there's going to be some pushback from people in the congregation. You're going to do what in a spin church? You're going to what? Tell me more about that. So what you want to be able to do is, if you have other people with you, you'll be getting buying along the way. And that's always important. So I would suggest, if your question is more along the lines, Belinda, of what is like an optimal team, I would say that a perfect number to actually do the work. You'll want to reach out, and team sizes can change and evolve, either get bigger during a certain part and then bring it back down to the core. But a perfect number is 3 or 4. That is a perfect number, because generally it's too small of a group for someone to just be sort of coasting and saying, I'm just in this group, but I actually don't do any of the work. And so where everyone's sort of expected to do work, generally it also means that those people are all into the work, right? They believe what they're doing. So I would say the optimal numbers are between 3 and 4. Other questions before we move on to?
We're still able to see all of these experiments if we go to the TryTank website, correct?
Yes, all of the experiments are at trytank.org. And while you're there, nice plug, while you're there, if you do sign up for our newsletter, you can also find out about other things that we have coming up. And also, like just yesterday, I sent out an email. We have about 1,300, almost 1,400 people in our newsletter. I sent out an invitation because we wanted 20 congregations to work with us in an experiment. And 32 of them, as of this morning, have already applied to work with us on an experiment. So that's how we put out the call for people to work with us in experiments. And we cover the cost of the experiments. We just need places to actually try them in. We need those guinea pigs, as it were. Any other questions, Jody, before we move on?
Nope, that's all I see.
All right, so what we're going to do now is, only because from here on until the rest of it is going to be straight on, and this is going to be fire hose at you all at once. So there's going to be a lot. So just take a moment to refresh your coffee if you don't have it. Right now, I have it as 8:40 in the morning, so that would be 11:40 your time. At 11:45, we will resume. So just take a little break. You can shut off your camera, and we will start back up at 11:45. And I'll stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to myself take a little second. Am I that loud? I don't want you to like be writing everything down. You will get a copy of the whole presentation. So just rest assured that that's coming towards you. So, okay, let us go forward. So far, you know that at the core of what we do is this question: what if? What if we did this? What if we did that? So it all begins with what if, because posing that question allows you to discover new things. Is when you're asking the what if question. So for our purposes here today, I wanted to have an example that we could just sort of continue with that example going forward, so that we're sort of building, because they all three steps build on each other, right? You do the insights, to do the ideas, to do the trying, all theoretically build on each other. You don't begin with trying, you begin with the insights. So the question we're going to be using is, what if we intentionally sought out new members? And that's a very specific question, because most of the time we just think people are going to come to us. It's like, well, we're there, right? People are just going to come to us. So what if though? What if I hope people come, but what if they don't? What if we actually wanted to go out and find people? And now's when we begin the actual work. We use this process called design thinking. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you probably might remember, even like 20 years ago, I think it was on Nightline, there was an episode about IDEO. Is a company based in California, IDEO, and they're a design thinking firm. What they do is they create new products. They did this whole thing on Nightline, how they created sort of a new sort of cart for grocery stores, and how they went through their process. And it is just, it's a really neat process, and that's what we're going to be going through. It's really just about problem solving, because every time we do what ifs, what we're actually doing is saying there's a problem that I'd like to solve. Like in our case with our question, what if we intentionally sought out new people? The problem is that we don't have enough people, or we want more people. That's the perceived problem. Is not necessarily a bad thing in that sense, but rather is what spurs us to want to change something. I have a friend who says that the only time you can change your paradigm is when it doesn't provide the answer to the question you're seeking. And most of the time what people do is they change the question rather than the paradigm. But design thinking allows you to change the paradigm to say, well, what if we did it differently? Rather than well, we've always done it that way. What if we did something different? Going to the point that was just sort of brought up, before we even begin, you're going to want to have a little team. You're going to want to have, like I mentioned, between 3 and 4 people is a perfect sort of number, is optimal for it. But you want to create a little team. And here's what you want to look for. You want to look for people that have different skills. You don't want to have a whole bunch of introverts. You don't want to have a whole bunch of extroverts either. If it was just a team of me, that would just, nobody would get a word in edgewise. So you want to have people that are introverted and extroverted, someone who's really good at analyzing stuff, someone who's really good at organizing and keeping us all sort of together. That's what makes it work, is when you have the different skills. Then, because you will be having different roles in the team, right? Someone who's an organizer can be the one that sort of keeps you on schedule, on time, on budget. If you have a budget, you don't always need a budget, but that sort of keeps you together. So the different roles, think of, and it's based on the question. As you start to think your question through, you'll start to sort of see, oh, we probably will want someone who's really good at researching in the library, or we probably want someone who's, whatever those things are. And it, like I mentioned before the break, the team size can evolve. It can get bigger and smaller based upon your current needs. So it might be that you want someone who's really good at researching, but maybe only during the research phase, maybe only during the first part of it, as you're trying to gain the insights. So you'll think through the roles. You want to have different ages, cultures, and genders. Why? Well, because diversity works. Diversity is important so that you can have different ideas. You can have someone that says, well, this impacts us this way, or have we thought about this? Or when someone mentions TikTok, that at least one of you knows what TikTok is, right? So that you don't all go like, is your clock broken? What's going on? So that you're able to actually, know a little bit. So ages, cultures, genders. And that's where T-shaped people, you want people that hopefully have a little bit of expertise, but that also have multiple skills. Those are the best people for your team. Those that have just, that may have 3 or 4 skills all at once, because it's rare that you find that we only have one skill. Most of us have multiple skills, right? And that we have deeper expertise in some of them. If you notice in the T, the reason why it's not a square, the reason why it's a T is because in some of those skills, you'll be really good at it. And so if your question is about, maybe the question that, like the question we're looking at, how might we reach out to new people? And you're thinking already that probably involves some young people. It behooves you to have people that sort of have a level of expertise about being young, i.e. having some young people that can join you in that. This makes sense, right? This is all just common sense as you're doing it, but it's intentionality going into it so you can have a team that works well for you. And that, now that you have your little team together, you sort of have your what if question. That brings us to step number 1, insights. And this is where we begin the real work of design thinking. So going into this first step, what you want to have is you want to have this mindset of curiosity. You don't want to have a mindset that says, I already know the answers, but rather you want to have a curiosity that says, it's okay not to know. And in fact, it's encouraged not to know as we begin this. And so when we, in this step, there's different ways of discovering insights. And these are the ways that we use on an ongoing basis and that work really well for us. It's odd that it's called secondary research and it's first, but that's where we begin, right? Secondary research, and we'll go through these in a moment. Secondary research, observation, interviewing people, and empathy, which is where you really try to live into their experience to gain insights that can help you create something. And don't worry, we will go into a lot of detail in all of these as we go through them. So let us begin with secondary research. The resources that you can use are multiple. And again, keeping in mind the question that we're looking at, right? For our example is, what if we intentionally sought out new people? Well, this is how you would begin, right? You want to sort of be able to Google, see reports. Barna is a research firm. Pew is if you wanted to reach out to Latinos, for example, if that was sort of what you were thinking in your mind, because we all come up with some assumptions. Pew Research has a lot of research on Latinos. Barna has a lot of research on young people. The Episcopal Church, Tech, has a lot of research on your own congregation and your own neighborhood. And of course, Google. Google has a ton of research that's available there. Google Papers, Google Books, all of those things add to the work that you're doing. You also want to be on the lookout for magazines, books, newspapers. There's a good chunk of, here's one. I'll give you an example. This one that I happen to be searching through, and I found this one because we're trying to come up with more experiments to try to reach younger people. And this is, was it just Jody? I may not have mentioned this, but the Church of England has been doing their national broadcasts, and they put them on YouTube, and they've been very successful. Not only each individual church, but the national church does a broadcast. And as it turns out, a third of the people who have been watching their YouTube presentations of their worship services are 34 and under, meaning that there's young people that are not turned off by the Christian message. We just haven't presented it either in a way that was interesting, or maybe it took a global pandemic that scared us all to make them realize what was really important. Whatever it is, it behooves us to find out more. So then I found this book, is You Found Me. It's new research on how unchurched nuns, millennials, and irreligious are surprisingly open to the Christian faith. All it took was a Google search. I just started searching for young people and Christian message, or young people and Christianity. You'd be surprised. Google is really, really good. So I found this book, but that books are also good resources for you to have and to just have handy. And this is how you do it. So you begin with your goal. Again, remember, our goal is, what if we reached out to other people, right? What if we intentionally reached out to bring new people? So you want to frame the research questions. What if we actually reached out to different people? Because then that allows you to say, okay, if we're going to reach out to different people to try to bring them into our work, we're going to have to look at that. And how do we look at that? So you begin to frame your question, because otherwise, right, the internet has a lot of information. You could easily get lost. So as you begin to frame and select your criteria, you're able to retrieve the data that you're going to use. Because as you're looking at this data, you'll actually be analyzing and say, what insights do I gain from this? If you look at your own statistics from Facebook Live, if you've been broadcasting on Facebook Live, or YouTube, if you've been putting it there, or however you've been putting out your digital services, you might also gain some information about what time are people watching it? Where are they watching it? What does it tell you about their demographics? Are they mostly male or female? These types of things will then inform the other stuff that you're able to go and get, these other resources to be able to do deeper. You might be getting more Latinos than you thought. And then the question becomes, how do I reach those types of Latinos who are already watching my English service, even though I don't speak Spanish? The data will sort of lead you from one to the other to the other. You compare these findings with others and say, like, okay, so this one place says one thing, right? So this book says one thing, and the Pew report says something that's either confirms it or denies it. If they contradict each other, can I find other information? And you're able from all of this to be able to start to draw conclusions. So let's look at our example again that we're going with and say, what if we intentionally sought out new members? The questions that you may want to frame is, okay, so who's around us? Who's around us and who's going to church these days, right? So when you look at that question, you're able to be much more clear about the type of research that you want to look at. Because what you really want to do is you want to be able to narrow down all this information you have from everyone, right? When you begin with a question like, who's around us, who's going to church these days, you start to narrow down from what if you intentionally sought out new members. So you want from new members, which is really everyone. And then you want to be able to go into more possible segments, like who's actually going to church, who's turning up. The fact that I just mentioned, for example, to you, that the early numbers are showing that young people are tuning into digital worship, that's an insight. That allows you to be like, okay, how do I find out more about those people? What kind of ages are they? What are they mostly male or are they mostly female? What's their do they have kids? Marital status, language. All of these things begin you to be able to narrow down this data that you've had. So you've gone from everyone, how might we reach out to different people, to how do we reach out to a particular group of people? How do we reach out to Latinos? How do we reach out to young people? How do we reach out to 34-year-old women who have 2 kids? You're able to be much more specific in the questions as you begin to go and look at the data. Data gives you so many insights that you obviously cannot predict them, because by definition, these insights are aha moments. They're like, what? I remember that when I first heard the gentleman from the Church of England, Adrian Harris, mention about what I told you about the YouTube numbers. And I was like, what? I think in the middle of the workshop said, could you repeat that data point again? I want to make sure he said it right, because that sort of is different than what we've been told all along. We had been told that young people were totally out. They didn't want to come in. So now knowing that, you're able to be like, okay, so let's follow with his example, right? Let's follow with that one. Let's say you gleaned this insight and you're like, young people are turning into the digital stuff. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Now, what do I do with that information? You might be asking Lorenzo, what do I do with it? Well, that's when we can move into the second part, which is observation. What you're looking for when you're doing observation is you want to see, is this matching what the research that I found tells me, or is it totally different, or are there new insights that I'm gleaming from this? And this is how you sort of do the observation. You want to be able to just find the area of what to observe. So if we wanted to figure out young people and this is interesting because most people think observation is like, I'm going to stand eerily behind and just take notes as I watch you. I see that you're picking your nose. That's interesting. What do I do with that insight? I don't know. But what it actually means is that when you're defining your area to observe, it might be like this insight we gleaned from the Church of England, right, about young people. To observe doesn't necessarily mean that I have to watch you as you're doing things. Sometimes it is. If you want to find out more about your neighborhood, sometimes the area that you want to observe is like, okay, I'm going to go to the grocery store and sort of see the people that are coming in and out of the grocery store that's nearest to the church, just so that I can figure out whether or not what we found out about demographic research around our neighborhood matches who's like actually shopping in our shopping center, which is the most generalized place in our neighborhood, more than like the movie theater, because more people, everyone's got to eat. And most people go to the grocery store to eat, to buy that food. So it all depends. But going back to the example of the younger people that are tuning into digital stuff, what if a way of observation might be, is there a way that someone will share with you? And this might be difficult. I'm just thinking it through, right? But would they share with you what are their bookmarks on their homepage, on their Google? Don't ask them for their history, their search history. That is just asking for trouble and never ask anyone for their search history on Google. But would they give you, what are the things that's how you begin to observe, is you can actually observe. In one of the experiments we did, I literally asked people, women over 70, I asked, would you do me a favor? Would you put out the contents of your purse and just take a picture of it and send it to me? Because what people carry in their purse, particularly women over 70, for this particular example that we were doing for the experiment, I wanted to see what it tells you a lot about the person, that they have little things that they take on there to make sure that they're always pretty, that they, no matter how small, or there were some women that had a lot in their purse, but there were some that had little. But being able to glean the insights, what are the things that all of them carry that are the same, right? You begin to glean insights like, a whole bunch of them are fill in the blank. It turns out that for women over 70, appearance is very important to them. And that's also, if you've noticed, any older senior citizens who come to watch your digital offerings, they tend to be the ones who dress up as if though they were going to church, rather than the people who show up in their PJs with their hair all messed up. There's a difference between the different demographics as to how they show up, even to digital church. So you define the area that you want to do. You want to be very careful about who you're selecting as the participants, because you want someone who will be cooperating with you. You want someone who will actually be helping you, like sharing you the contents of their purse. Someone could try to mess you up. So you want to make sure that you sort of know, are these the people, like, notice how I said when we looked at the inside of the women's purses, it was women over 70 years old. There was a reason for that. We thought that through very carefully. And then you carefully observe. What you're looking for are things that go, well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Like if you ask for someone's bookmarks or what are their top 10 websites, and it's someone who's 18 years old, and you see that 3 out of those top 10 websites are news sites, you might be like, well, that's interesting. I didn't think young people were that into the news, right? I don't know that that's what would come up, but it gives you an insight into the things that matter to them. Why would that be important? Young people who are into the news, guess what type of congregation they would be turned on by? Probably one that's into social justice. These aren't assumptions that take very far to get to, right? You're able to get this stuff. If you're looking at your supermarket, you can also take pictures. Be careful. You're not doing it to invade anyone's privacy, but more of the overall. How are people? This, by the way, this type of observation is not is certainly not illegal, but it's not intrusive or unethical in any way, because you're not intruding in their lives. You're just sort of observing to glean insights from them. Make sure you take notes so that you're able to sort of figure out, especially of any aha moments, like, oh, that's interesting. Anytime you say that's interesting to yourself, you've gleaned an insight. And this is where it's important that you have the team, because you always come back and you share it with the team. So here are some tips as you're observing that will probably help you. Look for things that are prompting behavior, like something that causes something to happen. right? Something that causes a behavior to change or to alter, or something that, like the fact that women in lipstick in their, or probably you, I would tend to believe that people in Southern Florida, women in Southern Florida, in their purses would probably have at least one product that has SPF, right? That prompts behavior. They want to protect themselves. So that's if you weren't from Southern Florida and you saw that, you'd be like, well, what's prompting that behavior? Why do they all have SPF? Until you realize, because it's always sunny and hot. Look for adaptation. So, like, remember when that picture that I showed you of the phone in the rice? That's an adaptation, what young people call hacks, to make something work better. So anytime you can glean an insight into a hack, that means that they've taken the time to realize that there was something there and they wanted to make it better. Those are beautiful insights to get. Look for what people care about. Certainly in their purses, you can see the pictures that they carry, or the cards that they carry, or what's most important to them. If you're actually observing people themselves, what you want to be able to look at is also their body language, because a lot of times you'll see, all of us at one point or another have seen people that you're like, oh, they're in a fight. You don't even have to hear them. You can just tell from the body language and the way they're staring at each other. You can tell a lot from body language about the emotions of someone. Look for patterns, misspelled as it is on my thing there, patterns, because what you want to be able to see is what are some of the objects or routines? What are some of the things that they use often? What are some of the routines that they change often? If going back to the example of looking at younger people, if you were able to look at the apps that they use, for example, you'd be able to see what are the patterns, what are the ones that they most use. Nowadays, that iPhones automatically unload, or they have the app there, but you see the little cloud that's there with the download, means that you don't use it enough. That would also give you an insight that they downloaded some apps, but they're not using them, or they haven't used them in a long enough time that it's not saved on the phone itself. That's a brilliant insight, because it tells you that there was something about the app that they caused them to download it, but not enough that they were able to continue to use it. So again, and you would be able to glean that from just, can I see your phone for a second, at the apps that you have? And feel free to put any apps that you don't want me to look at into a particular folder and tell me not to look in that folder, but I will look at the others. Just let me see real quick. That will give you a lot of insight into what's happening there and the routines. And as always, what you're looking for is that the unexpected, those things that's like, huh, that's weird. That's interesting. Like it did when I found out about the age of the people watching, right? So that's what you're looking for. Those are some of the tips as you're doing this work. And you'd be surprised if you just think of yourself like a documentarian, someone like, and now we're seeing the humans in their natural habitat, and look at that the mess they shop, or whatever it might be. Remember, the mindset is curiosity. You want to be open to finding and discovering the insights. And because then you're going to start to analyze what is actually matching what the research, right? When I looked at this book, it said one thing, and I basically went out to find what's called, if this is secondary research, you can imagine if I'm doing the research, what it's called is firsthand research. And that's what you're able to start to, and if you glean some things, if all of a sudden you have an aha moment, you sometimes from there are able to be able to start to draw some opportunities. And it's early still, but you want to be able to start looking like, because this is where your what if question becomes a deeper what if question. Like, knowing this about people, what if we did something? Knowing that young people are tuning into digital worship, what if we created something that was just for them or made specifically for them? So rather than just a general offering, was something that was out there for them. Just as important, it's important that you observe your congregation. Take a moment and just sit at the back and jot notes and just watch your people. Watch when they come in, watch how late they are, watch how early they are, how do they sit, when we do gather again, right? That's sort of a prerequisite of this. But the reason why that's important is because if you want to reach out to young people and you have a congregation that, like if a newcomer comes in and not a lot of people say hello to them, it's going to be difficult for you to keep new people that come. So you also want to sort of have a baseline of where you're at to be able to work on that. Because if you're not greeting people, then before you start inviting, you can also start simultaneously working on how do we make it so that we're a more welcoming congregation, right? So again, going back to our question, what if we intentionally sought out new members? For example, from the secondary research and observations, we now know that we have a potential segment. So we were able to research, we gleaned some insights. It's like, oh, these are the people that are in our neighborhood. These are the people, this is what the research told us. We confirmed it by going shopping and seeing the type of businesses that are around our church, by the type of people that hang out around the neighborhood where our church is. So it matches, so that's great. So now what you're actually starting to do, remember, we've gone from everyone to now you have a potential segment of people that's like, these are probably the people that we want to reach. And that's when you go into the next one, which is it's time to go deeper. It's time to interview. Dun, dun, dun. If we had sound effects, that's when I would have dropped that sound effect. And an interview is relatively simple. Interview sounds a lot more complicated than it probably needs to be. It's probably more just, it's time to have a conversation with these people, because here's some 5 tips for interviewing. You know, you want to, the reason why people do an interview would be more like, did you commit the crime? Yes, no. Did you do this? This, no. It's more like a survey, and that's not what this is about. This isn't about, tell me about the last. You want to ask open-ended questions. This is where I said, it's a conversation. You want to ask them, if we were looking at someone's apps on their phone, and you notice that some of them are news apps and that they're used on a regular basis. Hey, tell me more about, when was the last time you checked out the news? I noticed you have apps about news in your, tell me about that. What excites you about the news? Why do you keep up with the news? Why is that important that you looked at multiple sources? Stuff like that. Again, when you're coming at it with a curiosity mindset, it makes it much easier for you to be able to do that sort of work, to just have that conversation and ask why a lot. That's tell me more about that. Why do you do that? That's interesting. Ask for specific examples rather than generalities. You certainly want to. Those are called show me moments, right? And when you ask, just I put an asterisk there, because if you deepen the connection with the person, if they say yes, right? So the reason why. Hey, can I see can you tell me about the last 5 times that you went on a date? I don't know if you were doing something for young people and you want to do like a singles thing or something, and you want to ask permission. Like, is it okay if I ask you about your personal life? The moment that you do that, they say yes with before the question, right? When you're asking permission, what you're actually doing is you're asking them, hey, could you let me in a little bit deeper? And if they say yes, then of course, this is one of the places, by the way, where all of us who've ever done pastoral work, this is because we've all had these conversations where we have to ask to be invited in deeper. It's like, would it be okay if I ask you about, when you grew up? Would it be okay, that type of thing? Or if someone's in the hospital, we sort of have that mentality already in the church, which is great. So ask for specific examples. 3, you want to start broad, right? Begin with the bigger questions like, hey, where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up? Tell me more about that. And then sort of start to narrow down, like, you don't want to begin with like, hey, why'd you stop going to church? You want to sort of begin with the bigger and see what other insights you might get there. Because what you're doing is you're building rapport. Make sure that your own body language is building rapport. Make sure that you're doing this in such a way that it is it's open to what you're actually seeking from people, right? It's you want to be able to do it in a way that's good for both of you. Again, that's why the word interview, I really need to come up with a different word than interview, because maybe I should just say have a conversation, but it's still called interview because that's what design thinking calls it. And it's still about seeking information, whereas a conversation sometimes is not. And you do need to be mindful of that, because you don't want to be able to just like meander into a conversation about politics and you gain nothing about whether or not this is the type of person that would go to your congregation when all is said and done. Mind the gap, the things that they do, they say, and they feel, and then look for the inconsistencies. Like, okay, you tell me that you're all into taking better care of your health, but I couldn't help but notice that you ate whatever it might be, that you just had a candy bar or something, not judgmentally, but just in a curious way. Again, remember the mindset is about being curious, but just look at different things. Sometimes they say one thing, but they do another. Just sort of be curious, like, hey, you say that church is important to you, right? Or your spirituality, but you haven't yet told me about an example of a time that you actually feed it. How do you feed your spirituality? We see what we did there is we went from that, there was a gap. Spirituality is really important, but they haven't yet told you how they're sort of feeding it. Then it allows you for an opening to be like, how are you feeding it? Because either they're not, which would say that there's an actual demand, something totally just left out there, or it's something that they're actually doing and they haven't yet told you. So one of the two is what's happening. So you want to be able to mind the gap. So those are but remember, probably the most important of all these, which is why it's the first one, is ask open-ended questions. You don't want yes or no questions unless you're just clarifying. If you're just clarifying, like, did I hear you say this correctly? Oftentimes also repeating back to them is important. If it's something that you think like, well, that's a breaker, that's weird, that's really out there, tell me more about that. Did I just hear you correctly? Like when Adrian, right? Did I hear you correctly that 1/3 of the people are 34 or under? That's amazing. Tell me. So being able to figure that out. So to conduct the actual interview itself, it takes 3 steps. Step number 1, you want to plan your interview. In other words, you want to figure out, who do I need to talk to? If you're still going after trying to figure out about young people, and that's a place, who are the young people that you can interview? Is it just going to be someone random? Is it just going to be you that sits at a coffee shop and tries to figure out a young person that's coming in for coffee and you can talk to them? Or is it a friend of a friend that's already going to the church? The who is important because you want to be able to have a broad spectrum of different voices coming back at you. So you want to be able to gain different information from different people. You also want to make sure that the opposite is not true, right? That you're only gaining, if you're only going to the friends of the young people that are already in your congregation, for example, you're likely to be getting very much the same information. Or if you're only talking to the young people in your congregation, but even those people, those young people in your congregation would still provide you with insights. Like, why are you here? Your friends aren't here. You're here. You don't come with your parents, or you do come with your parents. It's just because they force you to be here. Finding out, just having those conversations, even in the observing your own congregation, remember that part. So finding even about your own people that are there, why are you here, is important. So that's number 1. Who are you going to be talking to? Then you want to have some topics. You want to be able to, from the research that you glean some insights. You want to be able to confirm or deny those insights. So you want to be able to ask about those insights. Hey, I read somewhere that young people really turned out for worship that when it was online. Did you ever turn out for it? What was it like for you if you did? Did you ever know you didn't? Did you ever know about it? Did you know that it existed? Those types of things. So you want to you want to talk to them about the research that you found. So you begin broadly, right? You begin with about them. Tell me about you. Tell me about your experience. Tell me about what you do. Where do you go to church? Do you not go to church? How often do you go? Just sort of some of the basics to sort of get certainly the demographics, like tell me your age, to do those things. But then sort of a baseline of like, do you go to church? Not go to church? But then you want to start talking about the research that you found. And then you want to sort of leave it open also in those topics for them to be able to provide you with some of the information that you may not even know is there, that you want to sort of reach out to. So that's important. So that's number 1, who, and identify the topics. Number 2, you actually want to conduct the interview, right? So you want to do it in remember, it's not a survey, and you want to be able to, even if you have your topics to follow, you want to be open to the possibility of like, oh, this is going somewhere else, but there's something here. This is good. So follow along. Even if I only got to 3 of the topics that I had on this, because you followed a good trail. And so you go out there and you conduct the interview, and you just have it. You want to have those moments. You want them to show you from their own experience, because this happens a lot, and people are very aspirational in being interviewed. They will tell you a lot of times what they wish their life was versus what the reality of their life. Remember when we talked about minding the gap? So this is an opportunity to be able to not say like, aha, I caught you, but rather, could you give me an example? When was the last time you did go to church? Or when was the last time you did do fill in the blank, whatever you're trying to figure it out? When was the last time you saw an online service? Tell me about that experience, because when it does two things. One is it grounds it in their reality, which makes it what it's real versus what they're aspiring to. And two, what it does, it also brings up the emotional parts. When they're able to tell you the story about how it happened for them and what it was for them, they're able to tell you about what they went through, what their emotions were as they're doing this. And what you're actually also looking for is, let's say it's someone that actually goes to your church or to a church, not necessarily yours. When you're talking to them, you also want to see sort of the decision chain. When did you decide to come to church? Was it never in question that you would not go to church? Or did you decide it on Sunday morning? Or did you decide it on Saturday? What sort of brought it? Or when did you decide to watch the service online? Was it because it just sort of popped up? Or was it that, well, you can see that from all of these things, you're able to get, like, if you get a good answer, you know you're going to be getting some insights. You're going to be like, oh my God, I spoke to 5 young people and they were able to tell me like that they caught it because it was in their Instagram feed. And that's what brought them to it. Is like, that's already telling you, if you want to reach out to young people and you start to see all these things that are pointing to like Instagram, then that's going to tell you something about how you may want to try something, right? Maybe that's the sphere in which you want to try it. You see how the insights are starting to feed the work that's going to go on from here. That's why you're already starting to look for opportunities. Be open, be curious, because it feeds into itself. This isn't rocket science. I am not a rocket scientist. It all sort of like feeds into each other if you just have curiosity as you're doing it. And then you want to come back. Step number 3 is share back. You want to be able to just talk back with your team and say, I heard this. Did you guys hear something similar? Because this is where it's really kind of cool to be like, I gained this insight, and you're like, and I gained this other insight, but they're totally related. They're incredibly related about. So the insight, remember when I told you that we bumped into the fact that particularly older members of congregations were showing up fully dressed to church? I gleaned that insight. That was not my insight. My insight was actually that they actually find meaning, just as much meaning from an online worship experience as they do in person. They miss the social aspect of it, but meaning-wise, like, do they find the transcendence of God and just as much as if they were in person? And my colleague who was doing the research with me, he discovered the fact that they dress up, but notice how they go together. Notice how the reason why someone dresses up is because this is just as important as if they were there in person. This is meaningful to them. Whereas I would, if we actually continue the survey, I have a theory, I have a hypothesis that for younger people, and probably not the youngest, but like that in between, the like Generation X, like me and others, is good, but probably not as good, not as transcendent as it is for senior citizens. And the reason why I say younger people with my theory is because they're digital natives, so they're there with it. So that's what you want to share. But if you're like, oh, Lorenzo, my God, I don't know how I'm going to have a conversation with these people. How's that going to work? I don't know. Then here's another approach. It's an easier why. Ask why 5 times. Hey, why do you, this is the example that I use. Hey, why do you go to church? First why. I go to church because I've always gone to church. Why have you always gone to church? I've gone to church because, well, that's how I grew up. My mother always took us to church. Why did your mother always take you to church? My mother took us to church because that's where we would find Jesus. Why was it important to your mother that you find Jesus? I guess because with Jesus in our lives are better. Why do you go to church? Because my life is better. Did you notice how we sort of one fed into the other, fed into the other? It's like peeling at an onion. This is another way of doing it. The unfortunate part of this is that it's not necessarily a conversation. Maybe this is a way, if you're stuck, and this is why I put it in here. If you're just like stuck, I'm like, oh my God, I ended up with a dud. This person's not answering anything other than with a yes or a no. Then go with the 5 whys. Just go for it. Just jump in and go with it. I'm stuck, Lorenzo. You're going to be saying to yourself, even though I'm not there, I'm stuck, Lorenzo. What do I do? Go with the 5 whys. There. Now you'll hear me say it in your mind as if you ever do get stuck, because that's another way of sort of breaking through. And that sometimes, because imagine that you did that, right? Why do I go to church? Because my life is better with Jesus in my life. Great. Tell me about that. Tell me about why Jesus in your life is important. Tell me about how your life is better. See how that can also lead to other things, and maybe that's how you begin your conversation. So that's another way that you can do it, is the 5 whys. Again, all these things, by the way, are from the business world. We didn't create them. They've been around for a long time. We're just sort of like using them. We're translating them for the church. It's like they're from the Greeks, we're all doing it all. So, and now we're going to go into, so we've done the research, we've done the observation, right? We did the secondary research, we've done the observation, now we've done interviews. Now it's time for empathy. Empathy is important. It really does matter for insights, because it allows you to sort of feel. It's different when you talk to someone about their experience as when you then try to put yourself into that experience, right? You can only glean so much from a young person about what their experience is until you try to put yourself in that experience. So experiencing firsthand gives you that emotional connection, because that's ultimately, remember we talked a little bit about the decision chain. That's ultimately where it all comes down. We all make decisions, and emotions play a big role into our decisions. Empathy, of course, is our intuitive ability to identify with other people, right? It's not compassion, it's empathy, that you can actually sort of be in their shoes and sort of do that. It lets you go beyond just the assumptions that you may have about someone to actually sort of be a little bit in their life. And it's not just about, quote unquote, knowing someone, but feeling like that person does. And this is particularly, I think, important for the work of the church. Because we oftentimes, we're thank God, right? We're not in the business of soul saving. Our goal is not just to have people come forward and profess their life to Christ, but rather ours is about, with Christ in your life, your life is better. We believe that, we really do. And the liturgy that we do, the worship that we do, is to give praise to God, because in those moments we find a transcendence, and those things matter to us, right? Notice all of those things are emotional. All of those things are not just about butts and seats. All of those things are not just about how many pledges do we have. All of those things, I would say, are about making disciples. So the more we can be empathetic with those we're trying to reach, they stop being just a market that we're going after. And this is where we're a little bit different than business. We're not just going after consumers, as it were. We're going after people that we think could be good disciples of Jesus Christ. It all goes back to Jesus. So when we look at empathy, it's called an empathy experience. So to conduct an empathy experience, right, to be able to sort of get into the shoes of the other person, you want to plan about what you want to learn. You want to learn, and I'm going to give you an example here about one that I did. So when COVID happened and all of us went online, we discovered senior citizens, right, were going online. That's what this example that I'm using. And we wanted to find out more about what were they experiencing. Was there some truth to the fact that they're finding more meaning there? Was there some truth to what's it like for them? We can have a whole bunch of research that tells us that they're showing up, but what's it like for them? So we wanted to learn in the experience that we were creating. One of the things that we learned when I did it, so we learned from the data that they were showing up in bigger numbers. We have some congregations, like, in fact, for the experiment that we had applications turned in yesterday, we asked for what's your average Sunday attendance, your ASA, and it's like pre-COVID, it was like 60. Post-COVID, we have like 160. It's like, well done. Yay for COVID for you. But what we wanted to actually sort of learn in this case, as seniors were showing up, was we wanted to get a glimpse of what does it mean. And we looked at, so the data told us that. Then we did some observation. We were able to see them, right? What do they bring with them? How are they dressed? What are they gaining from? We did some interviews. And in the interview, someone tells me, it was a comment in passing. Someone said, well, it's good to have a plan B. And they just went on. I'm like, hey, could you go back for a second? You said it was good to have a plan B. Could you tell me about that a little bit? What do you mean by that? I never would have thought about this. They said, and I did research afterwards to confirm it. They said, well, you know, when you get to a certain age, some things start to not feel so good. And you don't know when you wake up on Sunday morning if you're going to feel good enough to go to church. And the church that this person went to was not online before COVID. It's like, and I always, even in a lot of pain, made my way to church. Having it be digital allowed me to have a plan B, so that even if I was in a lot of pain or if I just couldn't make it, I didn't feel like I was totally missing out on the thing that was most important to my week. And that floored me. I was like, oh my goodness. Plan B for them was important, the opportunity for them. And so I said, okay, I want to really try to gain an insight into what that means. What does that feel like? And this was Mother's Day Sunday that I did this. And so I said, I want to learn, what if there's just a total random chance that the thing that I'm really looking forward to, and for me, on Mother's Day, was joining with my brothers and my mother on a Zoom call. What if that was totally left up to chance? What if there was a possibility that that would not? So I come up with 5 different answers to this question. What's it feel like to not be in control? What's it feel like to not be able to do what you really look forward to doing? I was really getting into the empathy of what this person was normally feeling. So I planned this experience out. And the way that I planned it, I set ideas, and I was like, and then that's step number 2, brainstorm some ideas that might give you the insight, right? So I wanted to figure out, how can I really get insight into that total loss of control of not being able to, without a lot of pain, make it to church, and why this is important. How does that feel? And so I brainstormed the ideas to be able to do that. And the idea that I came up with was, I would leave it up to chance as to whether or not I got to get together with my mother and my brothers on Mother's Day. And I would select a number. I would go on Google for the random number generator between 1 and 1 million. It does no difference. It could have been between 1 and 2. If it was odd, I would not be able to visit with my family. If it was even, I would be able to visit with my family. Totally random. Left it up to chance. And I did it. And it came up odd, which meant that I was not going to be able to be with my brothers and my mother for Mother's Day. And I cannot tell you how disappointing, how painful the thought of not being able to join with my family, something that I was really looking forward to. It was just this moment. And this is what I decided, right? Sorry. Step number 3 is designing it. From the ideas, I came up with several, but this was the one, right? The one totally leaving it up to chance. What will I do? How will I do it? And it was so much. And then at the end, when I conducted it, right? When I ran it, and it came back and it said that I was not going to be able to join my family, it was awful. It was just awful. And so when I shared back, right? And this is the example that I'm sharing with you. When I shared back this, I actually confessed to the other team members of the team. It's like, I wasn't able to go through with it. I wasn't going to make my mother suffer because of the chance. But even for that moment, because when I went into it, I felt pretty lucky. I felt like, oh, what did it, just from that moment of realization though. And I cannot tell you how much that made me connect with that person who told me about the plan B. And so if I were designing something for them, if I were designing, and this is one of the things that we're working towards, is like, how might we actually include them more rather than just putting cameras and broadcasting our services? Is there a way that we can include them more in our community life, even if they can't be with us in person? But that only came about because I did this empathy experience. That only came about because I was like stunned, shocked, and didn't want to do it after I was like, oh, but I want to see my mom. It's Mother's Day. How can I not? It was, and so all of a sudden for me, it was like, oh my God, I cannot imagine what it would be like to wake up on Sunday morning And there's a 50-50 chance that I won't make it to church today because just my body. There's nothing I did. It's not like I'm hungover when I was younger, right? It's none of that. It's just I can't do it. And it turns out, remember I told you I looked up the research afterwards, 2/3 of senior citizens have mobility issues to the point that it sometimes immobilizes them. And I was like, that's just amazing. So again, but you notice how they build on each other, right? You looked at the research, you looked at the data, you were then able to observe and say, does it match? You were able to go deeper into the interview. In the interview, there was the plan B thing that came up for me. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And created an empathy experience. You can create empathy experiences around, if you want to reach out to Latinos and you're only doing a service and it's on Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m., try having a job where you have to work on Sundays. Try doing, it's only when you can put yourself, we can plan the best things, but if we really don't know the lives of those that we're trying to reach, right, to get them to come to church, to be disciples, then we're not really doing the work. So that's the value of the empathy experience. So let me talk a little bit about when you come back and share with your team, because this is important. Yes, you're going to share the stories that you heard, but what you're actually doing is you're sharing the insights. What were those aha moments? And by the way, this is what a good insight is. An insight informs, right? It sheds a new light, something that you may not have seen, or confirms something. So it's shedding light on the needs and wants of the individuals. 2, it's inspiring because like, oh, we can do something with this. With this insight, plan B, right? The plan B insight that led me to now it's like, okay, now I'm inspired that I want to do something about, I want to create an experiment for TryTank that will create something better so that those who can't make it on Sunday are actually better able to have a community life, even if they're not with us in person. So even when we are able to gather together, like maybe we put in a television in the coffee break where we have the coffee hour, and people are allowed to Zoom in even if they can't be with us in person. What if, right? That's the underpinning of all these things. What if? Why not? And the third thing of a good insight is that it's memorable. I bet you that all of you going from here will remember Plan B, and will remember that for senior citizens, there's a chance that they can't make it on Sunday mornings. So it motivates you. That's what makes a good story. That's what's able to bring it together, to sort of put it together, to bring it to be an insight that you're able to then go into the next steps. So we've gone over the 4 steps. And what I want to do now it's time for us to break up. We're going to break up, people, but don't worry, we're going to get back together. What we're actually going to do is we're going to put you in. So I see that there's 20, if Jody and I are 2.
Yeah.
So there's about 20 people that are here. So we're going to put you maybe in 4 groups of 5. And Jody, if you can start sort of assigning those groups. Here's what we're going to do. Once you get into your group, I want you to find someone to interview. One of you will be someone to be interviewed, and one of you will be someone to be interviewed. Someone to conduct the interview, and someone to be the interviewed. The interviewer and the interviewee. I need to clarify that one there. Interviewer and interviewee. Assume that whoever the person that's going to be interviewed, assume that that's a segment, quote unquote, of the type of person you want to come to your church, right? Going on our example, what have we reached out? So you're trying to glean some insights. You want to learn about this person. So you'll have 10 minutes to do the actual interview. Take your time with it. It's a conversation. Learn about the person. Don't forget, if you get stuck, go to the whys. But learn about the person, learn about them, try to glean some insights. And then you're going to have 5 minutes with the others in your group to share those insights. Because here's what I want you to do. The person doing the interviewing is going to be focused on, oh my God, what's the next question I should be asking? It happens to all of us. It happens to me, right? Don't feel bad about it. But the other, so that person, the interviewer, will share some of the insights that you've gleaned from the person that you interviewed. If something is terribly off base, the person that was interviewed can be like, you got that totally wrong. You weren't listening at all. But the other people in the group, once the person shares back some insights, see if you glean something else that was different. Don't ask the questions during it, but say, like, I would have asked more about this because they mentioned something that was emotive, right? There was an emotion in there, and I would have dug a little bit deeper. I would have, so that's what you want to be able to do is be able to listen more, because you're not doing the questions. So you can listen more and just share with each other and see, and the person that did the interview can be like, oh yeah, I totally could have done that, couldn't I? So let's go ahead and do that. And what are the others here? And then we'll come back and we'll have about 5 minutes to debrief, and then we'll be done with today's date. So Jody, if we can go ahead and send the people, remember, separate, find one person to do the interviewing. Do that real quick. There's one of you who will want to be interviewed, one of you who will be the interview. Do the interview. We'll tell you when the 10-minute mark is up, and then when we have about 1 minute before we bring you back. All right? So go have some fun in the interview. Enjoy it. And I'm going to stay here. Interviews where you walk away from it and you're like, huh, I wonder if we actually gleaned anything from it. Nope, I did not. But you learn about someone else. And church is about relations. It is about relationships. And so even if all you did was have a good conversation where you learned about someone who lives in London, England, as Barbara did, then that in and of itself is not a bad thing. So the reason why we wanted to do this exercise was because interviewing sometimes feels weird. Interviewing feels like a sort of not quite normal thing that we do, and you're like, how do I do this? Why am I doing this? What's in it? So you want, the more you sort of practice it, the less it feels like you're a marketer that's trying to do something for, or in any way do something that just seems unchurchy. It is churchy. It is relational. It is about who we are. And it is from those insights that we glean that we're able to do this work. So with that, let me just tee up tomorrow, because we are officially at the end of day one. Tomorrow when we gather, we're going to talk about what do we do with these insights? How do we turn them into actual ideas of things that we might try? And there are ways of doing this. This isn't just like you with a pencil and it's like, okay, now what do I do? There are ways of doing this that are that spur your creativity, that sort of get it going and flowing. These are some of the things we learned from the business world, right? They do this on a regular. So we take that and we'll walk you through it. I'll walk us through that process as well. And then we'll finally talk in the last part tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit about how do we go ahead and execute on those ideas? How do we go ahead and try with what we call the minimum viable prototype? You don't have to go out and create something totally new and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, but rather how do we, using very few resources, just try the fundamental of what we're trying to get done. So that'll be our day tomorrow, same time, same bat channel. And with that, I'm going to bid you adieu. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to stick around if you have any questions, but thank you for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow. Let me go ahead and I can actually stop sharing. I'll see you tomorrow morning for the same time, and hope to see you all there so we can take some of this and move it down to creating new stuff for the church. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. I had a question, Father Lorenzo.
Sure, Bob.
That is, are you familiar with Father Christian Anderson?
Yes, I know Christian.
Voices? Yeah.
Yeah,
he's our assistant rector.
Oh, brilliant. He's a friend of mine. He's a good guy.
Excellent.
In fact, I was there the day he was ordained a deacon.